The government is proposing to lower the benefit cap in London to 23,000 and outside London to £20,000 a year. This doesn't mean that families get that very large amount of money. It means that that money goes straight to landlords in the private rented sector. The effect on Thanet will be that many poor families will suffer, either have to top up their rent from their own benefits or simply get moved somewhere else that's even cheaper than the place they're in at the present time. What we need is a reform of the private rented sector, including rent controls, including giving people stability of long-term tenancies. That has to be the right way forward. This benefit cap is only going to result in greater misery in Thanet and many other parts of England. There's a humanitarian disaster going on where a considerable number of migrants are living in shocking conditions in Calais and trying to escape that in order to travel by train or truck or any other means to get to Britain. There has to be a recognition of the needs of these people who are often very desperate themselves, who are victims of war and abuse in many other parts of the world. We need support for them. We need a processing system in Calais. We obviously need safety on the tunnel itself. The loss of any human is a terrible thing. The loss of anyone in a railway accident is a terrible thing. And so there needs to be some proper order brought to this by dealing with this as a humanitarian crisis and look at the causes that bring about these refugee flows, which further back down the line are leading to deaths in the Mediterranean, deaths in many other parts of the world. We have a responsibility as human beings to try and sort this thing out and bring about some peaceful resolution to these conflicts. I was pleased that Farage was not elected to Parliament. I wished Will Scobie had been elected in his place, and indeed I was proud to campaign for Will. Fantastic candidate, great local campaigner, and I hope he will get elected at some point in the future. The UKIP party don't actually offer any real solutions. What they seek to do is blame everybody else. And so they're not offering to build homes, they're not offering to build schools, they're simply offering a blame culture. What we need is the communities coming together to ensure that we get sufficient funding for the schools that are needed, for the houses that are needed, for the repairing of the homes that are needed, and regulating the private rented sector. And so I think that UKIP will be defeated. They'll be defeated by a resurgence of the Labour Party in Thanet. Well, the answer to the issue of the housing crisis in Thanet is that the council needs to be given the powers to borrow or sufficient resources in order to build the council houses that are needed. We also need to regulate the private rented sector to give long-term security for those people living within it. And we need to ensure that the building that takes place is for the good of the people that need housing, rather than very expensive properties which are sometimes bought off-plan, off-book as overseas investment, as a hedge against inflation in the future. We need a housing policy and a housing strategy that meets the needs of the people in desperate housing need at the present time. There is absolutely no need for any live animal exports to take place at all. There's unbelievable cruelty involved, often in the travelling of the animals to the port before they're exported, not given sufficient space in which to move around, often suffering injuries because of the crowded nature of the trucks in which they're carried, and then live exported onto those ships that take them, mainly to Europe, where of course they're then slaughtered as fresh veal calves normally. I'm against the live export of animals and absolutely admire those people that have stood up for so long to expose this awful trade. The danger of fracking is that it creates an explosion underground, albeit a relatively small explosion underground, in order to release shale gas, which is then collected. The problem is it requires vast amounts of water to go in to do it. Chemicals are used to add additives to it to help free up the gas. This then leads to pollution of the groundwater system and the groundwater supply. And when the gas has been exploited, the land is left behind in a devastated state, and the underground aquifers on which we all rely for decent, good quality fresh water are forever polluted. I am opposed to fracking. I don't think it's environmentally safe or sustainable and not an efficient way of producing gas. the closure of an A&E department is devastating for a hospital because it is the centre of any hospital. If there's no A&E, there's no elective surgery, the hospital eventually closes by 1,000 cuts. And so it's very important to defend the A&E department, and 20 miles is far too far for between A&E departments. Accidents happen, people need A&E, people have heart attacks, people have strokes, people have all kinds of urgent conditions that must be dealt with at a local level. The management system in the NHS, particularly since the Health and Social Care Act has been passed, has meant that too much of the service is contracted out. There's too much obsession with the internal market and contracting culture, whereas the centre ought to be provision of an efficient service, care for everybody, and promotion of good quality public health within the region. There are too many people involved in the NHS who are mainly concerned about how services can be run by somebody else, whereas there are many very skilled people in the NHS who've given their lives to the NHS, helped to keep us all healthy. They're the ones who should be listened to, and I would want to see a much more democratic management structure in which the views of everyone who works in the NHS are taken on board, and the sole objective is to produce a good, efficient service for a good and healthy population.